Here we go. Again, I gotta position myself a little bit better than this. Good afternoon, Facebook. As promised, I am back to share a few excerpts from my new book, From Broken Bread to Poured Out Wine. I'm going to be talking today from chapter 4. And chapter 4 is entitled, Your Grief is Personal. Your grief is personal. Your grief is unique to you. So you have to own it. Okay, it's not mind over matter. You can't say hocus pocus. You can't pray it away. You can't speak in tongues and it just goes away. I don't care how many trips you make to the altar on Sunday. Your grief, that loss, that pain in your gut is still there. So you have to own your grief. You have to own your pain. It's a process. And you must go through the process. Amen. You must go through the process. And so I want to talk again that your grief is personal. I'm just going to read a little bit from my book. And then as I promised on yesterday, I did post some reflections and some tips on yesterday. And I'm going to do that again today. So following the video, you can look for those reflections or those tips. Again, this is an ebook. It's not uploaded to Kindle. I just wanted to kind of talk about the book before I uploaded it. And I want to give you an opportunity to even download the book for free. There will be a 24-hour window in which you can download the book. It will be available on my website, www.don'tforgettosayyourprayers, and I will alert you when the PDF is loaded to the website. So you will have an opportunity. You can go to my website and you can leave a comment. You can leave your email so that I can give you some more nuggets from the book or from my other 2 books that I have written. I'm trying to get a list of emails that will make it easier for me to get in touch with you. Again, you can follow me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, and again, you can find me at www.don'tforgettosayyourprayers, which is the church website, but I also share it. So you can see upcoming things pertaining to our ministry and some blogs that I've written on the Facebook. You just look under blogs, and you can find out what's going on with Lydia Ford in International Ministries, and you can find out what's going on with my church. Don't forget to say your prayers. Okay. Your grief is personal. Many of us have experienced the trauma that comes along with the death of a loved one. So it's essential to recognize your pain is uniquely yours. You must own it, as I stated earlier. Your grief is influenced by numerous factors that are specific to your loss, and they affect how you may grieve differently from somebody else. I have to emphasize that. You will grieve differently from somebody else. Yes, they might have lost a husband and you lost your husband. They might have lost their mama and you lost your mama, but you will grieve differently from that individual. Don't let anybody put you in a box and tell you, well, I know exactly how you feel because I lost my husband, I lost my daughter, I lost my son. No, your grief is unique to you and your specific relationship to that person. Death and dying happen all the time, but losing someone close to the holidays is extremely difficult. And we talked about that on yesterday. I said to you that I lost loved ones in the fall of the year, in October, November, and December. And because of those holidays that are in between the Thanksgiving and the Christmas, and I it's just a devastating time because you expect to see those family members. People travel long distances across country, across the world to visit loved ones, and when those people are no longer there, it leaves a very big void in your life. So holidays are very difficult to go through. One factor that influences the grieving process is your relationship to the deceased, as I just said. I heard it said that when you lose a parent, you lose your past. When you lose your spouse, you lose your present. And when you lose a child, you lose your future. I'll say that again. It has been said that when you lose a parent, you lose, you lose your past. When you lose your spouse, you lose your present. When you lose a child, you lose your future. The loss of a parent can cause a domino effect with other issues. Deep within your psychic, we assume our parents will always be there. But when a parent dies, we may be so concerned about the living parent that we neglect our own grief. Isn't that true? If a mother dies first, we're so concerned about the father that's still alive, we don't even go through the process of grieving. Or if your dad dies and your mom is left behind, sometimes we don't take the necessary time to go through the process because we're so concerned about the remaining parent that's alive. And if we lose both parents, we may think about our own mortality. Sometimes surviving children feel a sense of guilt when one or both parents die. That sense of guilt often leads to depression and other types of anxiety disorders. And children that had a close relationship with their parent may make it through the grieving process more comfortably compared to children who have experienced harsh treatment like physical, emotional, or physical abuse or emotional abuse, even sexual abuse at the hand of one or the other parent. It's not uncommon for children of abusive parents to feel, watch this, a sense of relief or peace when an abusive parent dies. People must not expect the child that has been left behind to grieve in the same manner as another child who has lost a loving, caring, devoted parent. I was an adult when my mom's mother died, when my maternal grandmother died. And my maternal grandmother and my mom did not have a great relationship, a loving relationship. My mom left home when she was just 16 years old and came to Brooklyn, New York to live with her father's sister. And so they didn't have that really close, loving, kind, compassionate, devoted relationship. My mom told me stories of her being mistreated, treated harshly, and I don't know all of the underlying factors for that. But I was truly amazed that when my grandmother died, at the response of my mom at her funeral, because I had always heard about how bad how hard and how difficult her life was, and how they didn't like her, and how she was mistreated. But then at the funeral, my mother just really broke down. We were just all in shock because I did not expect her to react the way she did at her mom's funeral. And so we just had to, console her, and we just had to love on her and help her to make it through that moment. I don't even think she expected to feel that way at her mom's funeral. But my mom was always kind towards her mom. She did not disrespect her. When she moved up north, she would always send money back. She would always, in matter of fact, she would help her other siblings, because she was the oldest of 7 kids. She would help her other sisters to come up north and help them get a job. And some of them were young enough, they went to school up in Schenectady. So she was always caring, always loving towards her family, but it wasn't reciprocated from her mom. So we never know what is in a person. And when somebody dies, we just feel a sense of loss because that person was her mom. She was the one that brought her into the world. And I'm sure she felt a sense of guilt reacting the way that she did, even at the funeral. But That's why I say you have to own your grief. Everybody grieves differently, depending on the relationship you had with the deceased. Now, the death of a spouse can affect our lives in many ways as well. Those of us who have experienced the loss of a spouse may have lost a best friend. And I have experienced the loss of a spouse. Yes, I would consider him a best friend. You lose a best friend, you lose a lover, husband, or wife, and our security, our physical, emotional, and financial stability may be in peril. Even our own self-identity can be questionable because the surviving spouse may be forced and to assume roles that they may not be prepared for. For example, caring for an infant, caring for household repairs, cooking, cleaning, auto repair, handling the finances, and household cleaning. I know that when my son-in-law lost his wife, my daughter, he had an infant child. She was just maybe 15 months that he had to assume responsibility for. He had to be her mama and her daddy. He had to take care of her, make sure she had proper child care because he had to work, make sure that, he found someone to take care of her hair because she had lots and lots of hair. He had to cook, he had to clean, he had to do a tremendous amount of child care and emotional and mental care. He had to prepare this little girl mentally for not having a mama. I remember him telling me that when she was, just a little toddler, she would walk, just after Danielle died, she would walk into her mom's room looking for her mom. And she kept doing that repeatedly until it finally dawned on her that her mom was not there in that back room and that she would not ever see her mom again. So the role of the spouse who has lost a spouse is tremendous. It's a tremendous weight. It can be. I remember when my husband died. I was capable of paying bills because I paid my own bills. We had, he had an account, I had an account, we had an account together. So I didn't have a problem paying bills. But something as simple as changing a light bulb, I know that sounds stupid, or something as simple as changing the battery in your fire, the fire alarm. Just little silly things. I would just cry because I didn't have to do that. I know that sounds strange, but it was just some of those little things, that I didn't have to do. I didn't have to climb up on the ladder to change the batteries. I didn't have to go outside and unscrew the lamp up above the porch to change the light bulb. There were just certain things that, I wasn't accustomed to doing. I didn't have to worry about, having to do car repairs or taking my car, to have the battery check or to do this or that, because my husband did all of that. So the death of a spouse can force you into assuming roles that you're not prepared for. And as I just finished stating, it can just be something simple, that just little simple things just threw me off. I would just be crying and calling my son, to come and help me do this. And he'd be like, "What, Ma? A light bulb?" But it was an emotional thing that I was actually going through. The loss of a child was the most difficult because it seemed counterproductive to the laws of nature. Many parents expect to outlive their children, but times have changed and it seems like more children are dying before their parents, and in some cases even before their grandparents. The hopes and dreams that we have for our children die with them. I couldn't, in my wildest imagination, expect to lose my daughter at 29 years old. My heart was broken into a dozen pieces. And when my daughter was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer, my husband felt such a sense of guilt and helplessness. Tom thought that he failed to protect his little girl, and he was unable to comfort her in the most tremendous amounts of severe pain and distress. He felt an enormous sense of guilt that just ate away at his heart and spirit. I remember him telling me, I think it was when he went with her to one of the cancer center treatments in it was in Chicago, and my daughter was in such pain. She just cried out to him, and he felt such a sense of hopelessness, such a sense of guilt. I just think it just haunted him and just ate away at him. But even though this young lady was married with a husband and a child, that was still his baby. And not being able to console her, not being able to comfort her, not being able to take away that pain just kind of ate at him. And sometimes I wonder if he just died inside and that was just ate at him. And, he died that next year. He was diagnosed with lung cancer, and he wasn't sick. He was diagnosed with lung cancer on he went in the hospital October the 3rd in 2011, and 25 days later, he was dead. So, if we don't take care of our pain, if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't grieve properly, and go through this process, it can actually eat you up alive. It can morph into sickness, like I told you on yesterday. Now, the death, the death of a child. Now, watch this. The age of a deceased child, it doesn't matter. The level of pain and sorrow is the same. When my grandmother was 95 years old, she suffered the loss of my dad. My dad died from lymphoma cancer at 75 years old. He was on hospice, and he had traveled to Schenectady, New York to see his mom, my grandma, who was celebrating her 95th birthday. He begged my mom. They were living in South Carolina. He begged my mom to go to see his mom. He wanted to be there to celebrate with her. I don't know if my dad knew that he, was never going to come back. But he was determined he was going to go see his mother for her 95th birthday, and he did. Unfortunately, my dad died the night before he was to return to back home to South Carolina. He died. And when my grandmother got the news that, my dad had passed, and he was right there in the same town, it was a tremendous burden. It was a tremendous weight. It was tremendous pain to know that her son, who had traveled all this way to come and visit her on her birthday, and that Sunday they had even gone out to eat together with his brother, but he would not return back home to his wife. So it doesn't matter how old the child is when a parent loses a child, whether it's an infant child, an adolescent, teenager, a young adult, a mature person, or somebody that was what I would say an aged person, 75 years old. The Bible's promised you 70 years plus 10, and he had made the 70 plus 10 and 5 more. It's still painful when a parent loses a child. No matter what, it's a painful thing. Every time I would visit my grandmother after my dad died, she would tell me, she would just rehearse in her mind. She would rehearse orally the last time she saw her dad. She would say, I could just still see your dad standing in the door, and I'm just in awe, wondering, why is he here? But he was there to see his mom. He was there because God had designed for him to die there. Matter of fact, they had already had my brother predeceased both of them. My brother predeceased his mother, and my parents. Because my brother died. My brother died. I'm getting ready to talk about that when he was 21. So my mom and dad had their plot already in Schenectady. So my mom didn't have to pay a fee to ship him back to South Carolina. To Schenectady. He died right there. I don't know. God has a way that is just, you can't figure out God, because his ways are not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts. But because he died in Schenectady, all my mom had to do, and my sister, was to get on the plane and come back home, which is their home, and bury my dad. But like I said, the age doesn't have anything to do with it. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is that I'm not going to be on here long, but I also want to talk about the death of a sibling. I lost my brother when he was 20 years old. And so, when you lose a sibling, it's like losing your arm, it's like losing an appendage, a part of you. My brother, my brother was not even a year older than me. He was like 11 months and some days. He was born in 51, August of 51, and I was born in July of 52, and then my sister was born in July of 53. My mom and my dad were pretty busy for 3 years, so we had a very close bond. And when you lose a sibling, like I said, it's like losing an appendage. It took so many years for me to get over the death of my brother. He was actually in the Air Force, at Elgin Air Force in Florida, and so that's another type of relationship we have. And my point again is your grief is unique, and one of the factor that determines how you go through that grief is based on your relationship. And my brother and my sister and I had a very tight, we were close in age, so we were tight, and so the hurt was deep and it was long. It was years before I even would go and visit him at the cemetery. The last thing I want to talk about is miscarriage, because we don't talk about miscarriage and stillborn births enough. And it's important to note that miscarriages, stillbirths, and infant deaths are often minimized by the general public. I experienced 2 miscarriages, and that devastated me. I was a young bride, a young wife, and not in my wildest dream did I expect to lose a baby once I conceived. It was exhausting to listen to people rationalize my baby's death with statements like, well, something must have gone wrong. It probably was an indication the baby wasn't developing properly. Many older women told me, well, at least you didn't get attached, or don't worry, you can try again in a few more months. But what people fail to realize is the minute that the doctor confirms that you're pregnant, the mother begins to fantasize about that baby. The mother becomes attached to that baby. They start feeling their belly. They can't wait till that belly starts to expand. And there are certain hormones that just take over. As an expectant mother, we begin, again, like I said, to fantasize about the sex of the baby, what he or she will look like, and even start decorating the baby's room in our head. And many pregnant women become immediately attached to what is growing in their womb. And with each prenatal visit, a woman protects that baby and expects to see the fruit of that pregnancy result in a live birth. And if that child does not live through that pregnancy, it can be extremely overwhelming and a devastating experience. Trust me, I went through 2 of them. Now, the first one, I could kind of regather myself because people say, oh, you be all right. You can try again in a few months, another year or so. But when it happens to you again, you begin to feel a whole another kind of way. Because after that second one, I really did get depressed. After each of my miscarriages, I felt awful and disappointed. And I thought I let my husband down. I thought I left my parents down because they were eager, and on both sides of my family, my in-laws and my mom, they were excited that I was pregnant. They were looking forward to their first grandchild. But there are many women that experience not one, but multiple miscarriages. So I want you to know that feelings of guilt, if anybody is on here that has ever had a miscarriage or have had multiple miscarriages, I want you to understand that it's normal to be disappointed. It's normal to be emotional. It's normal to feel guilty. All of those feelings are common. All of those feelings are normal. And then watch this. Most men sometimes men have a different emotional connection or an emotional reaction when their wife has a miscarriage, because they're men. They can't always identify what is going on inside in our body. Men think mostly with their head and not with their heart. They may be lovingly trying to assure their wife by saying things like, well, we can always try again. But on the other hand, it takes most women far more time to process the emotional pain associated with losing a child prematurely than it does men. I'm not saying all men cannot identify with his wife losing a child prematurely or having a stillborn. I'm just saying men are from Venus or from Mars and women are from Venus. It's just totally different. But what is not different is this. It is never appropriate for anybody, especially a family member or a friend, to say disparaging words that will cause a woman who has miscarried a baby or had a stillbirth to feel worse than she already does. What we need to do, and I'm getting ready to close, is surround them with love and give them the necessary time to heal emotionally. And if a woman, watch this, has difficulty getting back to her normal routine, getting back to her job, getting settled back into the routine of keeping her house and keeping her husband, she may need to seek counseling. After my miscarriage, I sought to develop a more significant relationship with the Lord. And I found comfort in reading the scriptures. I found comfort studying the Bible. I continued to go to church. I increased my prayer time. And all of those things helped me to, and I had a loving husband and loving parents. Those things helped me to get over those miscarriages that I had. But thanks be to God, the third time was the charm. And after 5 years of my husband and I being married, we conceived and we had our firstborn child, and that was Danielle. She was the love of our life and the love of all of our family members. So again, as I bring this to a close, I just want to reiterate in chapter 4 of my book is called that your grief is personal. It's personal. It's unique. And everybody grieves differently. I don't care, like I said earlier, if you have experienced the loss of a sister and somebody says, oh, I lost my sister, or I lost my brother, or I lost my wife, and oh yeah, I lost my wife too, or I lost my husband, and yep, guess what? I lost my husband. But guess what? Their loss is different from your loss, because they could have had a jacked up, messed up, toe up from the floor up husband that was beating they behind 24/7, 365, and you had a loving, caring husband, devoted husband, didn't cheat on you, gave you the sun, the moon, and the stars. So how could your relationship be the same as somebody else whose husband was beating them 24/7, 365? No, your relationship is different. Your grief is different based on your relationship with that person, whether it's a parent, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a child, or a sibling, or a friend, even a friend. So thank you for listening. Brother Tony, you hung in there. It was one of the males. God bless you. I love you. And your wife, Kim, thank you for taking time. I don't know who else is on here. I'm going to play it back, and I ask you guys to share it, because I know this is one of the things that we do not like to talk about in the church. And we need to talk about death and dying, because as I said yesterday, you can change your doctor's appointment. You can change and you can cancel your dentist appointment. You can cancel a treatment for diabetes or some other disease. You can cancel your child's appointment at the school, to come and hear about how they're doing. But death is something you cannot cancel. You cannot cancel that day. That day has already been written in eternity. And we all gonna keep that appointment, because we know not the day nor the hour, hallelujah, when our number is up, when God is gonna call us. And we're gonna live one place forever. we're gonna live one place eternally. So we gotta prepare for death. We prepare for everything else, but we need to prepare for death, because it comes upon us suddenly sometime. And tomorrow I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about sudden death versus anticipated death, because there is a difference. People react differently when they know that somebody is going to die. There's an anticipated date or time when they expect that person to succumb to death, versus a death that happens just suddenly. And then there's also suicide, and how people handle the death through suicide. That's a whole nother scenario. So we'll talk about those things tomorrow. But thank you for inviting me into your space on Facebook this afternoon. I am going to send the tips from what I talked about today. Your grief is personal. It's unique to your experience with the one that you love. God bless you. And as I often say on my blog space don't forget to say your prayers That's what I was getting ready to say. Don't forget to say your prayers, and please say one for Pastor Lydia. God bless you and have a wonderful day. Have the rest of a wonderful day. Have a good and godly day. Look for those tips on Facebook. I'm getting ready to post them.